Hey everyone. Um, just checking real quick. Please let me know if you can hear the audio. Looks like it's going through. Um, but right now I'm also running this stream on Instagram as well as YouTube. So if you're watching this in the archive, I'm just clicking on both the Instagram and the YouTube stream. So I'm guessing if you're here today, I'm actually going to be talking about how to um, basically convert your physical artwork or your let's say your paintings, your sculptures, your installations, basically anything that is a physical piece of art, and convert it into a digital artwork that is three-dimensional that you'll be able to then use for a number of things, which I'll cover. Um, so let me get started. Just checking on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, hello also. Hope this. Let me know if the view is not too great on the Instagram, but I'll adjust it for future shows. Let me see. Let's get this going. So first of all, again, my name's Sam. If you want to find out more about me and what I do for my art practice, you can go to this website. Um, uh, so then going into the actual subject that we're going to talk about today, before we even really dive into converting your artwork into three-dimensional objects, we first kind of need to understand the basics of what actually is a 3D object, just so that you know like what you're trying to convert your work into, so that then it's workable to then put it on different platforms or showcase it in certain ways that you want to. Uh, so, so first of all, whenever something is made into a 3D model, either from scratch or through the methods that I'm going to be talking about, it usually ends up in the form of a polygonal model. So when you see like what they call a wireframe, which are what you're seeing all here, where you have all these points in space. It's like it's three-dimensional. You get these vectors they call, which are 3 points, the X, Y, and Z, and those points then are connected to each other to then build a model. And all that information then creates the physical digital type of like shape that you get. So there's a lot of different programs to make these, like Blender, Maya, um, ZBrush, as well as a bunch of other ones. I'm not going to get into those because that's not what we're talking about. But this, so basically, your artwork will get converted into 3D math that then programs take that information to build then a 3D model from. And then additionally, on top of that, then once you have your 3D model, you have you basically get that 3D model and wrap it with a texture. It's almost like getting a present, and you basically wrap that present in wrapping paper. You can kind of see the example here where we have like the cube is wrapped up with the texture all over it, and this is like a picture of it being unwrapped. You have this like flat face of the person that you see here that looks kind of weird. But if it were to be on a three-dimensional model, kind of like in the previous frame that we had, like if you see in the bottom, you could wrap that then with this texture that then makes it look like an actual human head with features and everything. So a texture is basically a flat image, just like a JPEG you would find online, and then that image gets applied to the 3D model. There are more complex things than that, like bump maps and normal maps, which kind of give it more like a physical texture of it popping out. But again, I'm not going to get into that, but that's for future discussion. So those two elements primarily make up a three-dimensional model, kind of as we know it nowadays, um, and how we see it in a lot of the applications and pieces of software that use it. So then talking about the software, having a 3D model, like if you have artwork, like why would you want to do this? Like why would you want to convert it into a three-dimensional model? There's a lot of reasons why. Um, one of them, one of the primary ones that I've seen is reconstructing locations. So, like, let's say as an artist, you have a large installation. You can actually document that installation not just as like photographs like you normally would. You would actually convert that entire space into a 3D model where you have the detail of a photograph, but also have the 3D aspects of the space. It's not like where you see like 360 pictures or video, where that is just one flat image wrapped around in a sphere. Here you actually have the polygons to then like make the three-dimensional parts of those objects that are in the space. It takes a very long time, but you get it, the end result is a very detailed thing. One of the more recent, or I wouldn't say recent, they've been doing it for a while, but like one of the primary uses for 3D scanning lately has been for archiving and portfolio purposes. A lot of museums they don't have a ton of physical space, as well as they need to document objects as they were when they received them, or in their original or best state. So when they archive it digitally, it always stays in that state, and they have a three-dimensional perspective, so they can check and reference the original condition that the items are in. As an artist, though, you could have part of your portfolio 3D models as opposed to just flat images or alongside your flat images. Um, there's a lot of websites that you can upload 3D models to then have embedded into your website. Um, there's some for as an artist, I think archiving it as 3D is really useful, especially if you work out of like your home and these objects can't totally exist always. You might need to like put it into another art piece, or it might have been sold, so you don't have that 3D aspect of it anymore. So this is a very good use of like 3D scanning. Then the second part of the archiving too, as well as after you've scanned and even like your installations that you've documented, that you can start 3D printing. So once you have that scan, you can then get your model converted into different materials that then are actually physically printed. It's You have a wide range of things that you can do with it. You can even use it as a mold or create a mold from your 3D print to then mass produce these. You can use it for medical reasons. So it's very useful, especially if you're trying to make a small prototype, since a lot of 3D printers can't print like super huge. You can like downscale things that you've worked with. You can also, it's a nice way to reproduce your artwork that then you can share with other people at an affordable price. One note to add here too, if you have a 3D model or a 3D scan that you've made, a lot of public libraries actually print your 3D models for free, or your 3D prints, I should say. So if you use a library or you don't, this is a really good reason and an affordable way to get your artwork reproduced on a small scale. Another good reason to do it is for reference. Like, let's say you're a figure drawer and you don't always have somebody available. You could potentially scan them, or even like a pet or a scene, or the added benefit of this as well is if you know how to work with 3D programs, you can actually manipulate the lighting as well as the textures that are on your reference models. So I think this is a pretty good method. I've seen a couple of manga artists actually use 3D models to build a space, and then they set up the scene and then use that as a reference to then like create backgrounds for their manga. And then one that is pretty nice, and also I think goes along with documenting spaces, especially for installation art, is you can then use these 3D models in game engines, which is also used for building VR. So if you want people to physically or actually traverse the spaces that you've created or installations, these these 3D scans can then be put into a space, and you can scale them to whatever size you need, or manipulate, like set them up in a way that the users can actually interact with parts of your installation or artwork or whatever it is that you've scanned. So I think this is something really interesting, especially right now since everybody's staying at home. I think this is an opportunity for a lot of artists to work in VR. So I think that's something pretty cool. An additional side note, kind of connected to this. So Interactive Initiative, we're working with a bunch of local artists in South Florida. We're building an application called Tropy, where it's similar to Pokemon Go, except you're going to key locations across South Florida and picking up unique artist artwork. A lot of these artworks have actually been scanned using the methods that I'm going to be talking about. So it uses augmented reality to blend those 3D models into the real world. So augmented reality is an interesting thing to work with the tools that I'm going to be showcasing. But if you're more interested in the development of this application, just go to the link that I have at the bottom. There's going to be more announcements in the future. It's coming along and it's pretty exciting. So I recommend you check it out. Okay, so understanding the uses for it, then we can jump into the actual methods to create or convert your information into, or I'm sorry, the different methods of how 3D models are made. So there are quite a few, but there's two primary ones. This one is what you call a LiDAR scan, where it literally sends out wavelengths to measure the space. So it builds up a space based on like shooting wavelengths out and it receiving data back to then to create a picture in 3D space. It's similar to how a bat works. LiDAR is really accurate and you get a really dense model from it, but the trade-off is a lot of the equipment to actually do it is pretty expensive. So if you don't have like a grant or you're doing it or you're not doing it through an organization, this might be a very expensive method. They use it for surveying. It's a lot of like government and crime scenes use this. But this is nice to have, but it's also probably outside of artist budgets. The other method, which I'm going to mostly be focusing on with this, is a thing called photogrammetry, where you take a large number of photographs of your objects or space, and you compile all those photos, and you then take the photos, put it into a separate piece of software that then converts them all into a 3D object. It uses a bunch of complex math to figure out the depth and space of the entire number of photographs that you've compiled. It's pretty cool. It is time intensive, but at the same time, it's from a very low budget to being absolutely free, where the only thing you need to do is have a computer and some time, as well as like a camera, which you have on your phone. So photogrammetry is mostly what we're going to be talking about. So now I'm going to get into the actual tools to then convert to actually create your 3D models. And most of these are going to be using the photogrammetry method, and I'll explain if there's additional methods to it. A note though, I'm going to start from the most expensive options that are still workable for an artist budget, all the way down to the free and affordable ones. And just keep in mind that these are all very good tools, but they work differently but you still use the methods of photogrammetry that I talked about in the previous slide. So first of all, there's Autodesk Recap. This is just Autodesk. You get all your photos that you've compiled with your photographs. Again, I forgot to mention, I'm going to get into how to do your photographs for photogrammetry after I talk about the software. But Autodesk Recap, it does cost $310 a year. The nice thing about it is you upload your photos, it gets sent off to their servers, and they do the processing for you, and then it gets shot back at you, and you have like this nice little 3D model. It's very hands off. You still have a lot of control over it, but it's been simplified so that the user interface and like the person converting everything has a really easy and quick time with it. So, but that's what you get when you pay $310 per year. Then there's Agisoft Metashape. For a while, this was a standard for photogrammetry. It can be pretty technical to work with, but you get very accurate 3D scans. They're pretty nice. It just takes a little bit of setup. There's a lot of variables and numbers you got to put into the system. It takes some time to learn, but it's still a very powerful piece of software. It does cost around $180. They do have other options that are higher than that, but it's roughly this. That's what you will probably be paying. Then jumping way down in terms of price, this is one that probably a lot of you can use. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's Turnio, I think. It's about $3. You can get it on the iPhone or the iTunes App Store. You can use this to scan objects. I think it does environments as well. It kind of guides you through the whole process. It's really intuitive and nice and clean. You can then grab that 3D model and bring it over to whatever program you want to use. That is a really quick and easy option. I recommend this as like kind of a starting point, as well as if you're comfortable with it, you can keep using it, I think, for documenting that work in 3D. Then there's also this program called Regard 3D. I have this on here just because it is another option. It's also very complicated. So I'm not going to get into this, but this is an option. Just understand it takes a lot of setup. It's not user friendly. It's not something that you're going to probably want to use. There's other options here that I'm going to show that you probably will want to use. There's Colmap. This is also another one that's a bit complicated. It took me a little bit to learn to set up, but this is an option, just so you know about it. Then there's this one. This is probably the best option on Android that is available. It's on iOS as well. It's called Displayland. It presents itself as like a social network for scanning 3D objects. So you actually scan environments, and it adds like a location to where you scan that object, and you can share it with friends, and you can connect with other people that are scanning environments. You can do these fly-throughs and look at them. But the nice thing is it's entirely free, and you can, after you've gotten those scans done, you can export them as a 3D object to then work with and do things that you need to. The one thing I will say is that scanning an entire environment, you need really good lighting because it tends to be a little bit messy. So it might be need a lot of cleanup. It's going to vary from user to user, especially with the different types of phones that you're going to be running. But this is one that I think as an Android user you're going to want to use. And don't be fooled that it is a social network that they built, but ultimately it's actually a tool to do 3D scanning. Then there's Meshroom. Meshroom is the one that I primarily use for converting objects. With this one, again, like photogrammetry, you take a large number of photos. I'd say from 50 to maybe like 150 photos, and you shoot your objects from multiple angles. You upload it. The nice thing here is that the entire thing is entirely free. It's really the interface is not complicated. If you ever look for tutorials on this, they're a lot more straightforward than other programs. You have a lot of control over it also, so you can let it be as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. It does take time to get used to using, but it's, I think, the best option out there, both in terms of price as well as the capability of it. This program is actually not for 3D scans using photogrammetry. This is actually a program used for 3D printing. It's built to work with different models of 3D printers, but the added benefit of this is that it has a really nice interface for cleaning up your models. So if you don't want to use some like complicated setup like Blender or Maya or ZBrush to get your models cleaned, because you get a lot of artifacts sometimes in your scans. Mesh Mixer is a nice little option for for you to be able to work with. Plus, your after you've edited your model, it'll be nice and ready for 3D printing right away. So then, in terms of actual equipment that you're going to want to have, the best thing you can have is a DSLR camera. I think I have to look back at this, but I think if you set it to like if it's on manual focus, that's your best because you're going to be shooting it from the same distance every time, which I'll explain in a little bit. You can also have a wide angle lens, which is pretty helpful. You want it between 12 to 20 millimeters. Your phone is also a good option. So if you have like a semi decent phone, most modern day smartphones have cameras that are good enough to then convert your photos into 3D object. And it's usually the one way most people do their photogrammetry just because it's quick and easy. A tripod is really helpful as well, just so that your images are stable and like not blurry. Just because the more consistent each photo is with the next one, the more likely your 3D model is going to come out correct. You also want to have even lighting. If you're going to be shooting outdoors, like a scene, you don't necessarily need this, but if you're doing like an object, you might want to get some box lights or set up an area that uses even lighting. So these are some options. You can have like an LED panel. You can make some out of cardboard boxes if you want to, and like nylon. But it's nice to have this if you're doing specifically objects. Again, also, if you're still doing objects, a turntable will make your life a lot easier because you can just set up a tripod in one spot and then your turntable will turn a little bit. You take a shot, turns a little bit more, take another shot, turns more, and you just do that as opposed to having to actually go around the object from every angle. An added note too, if you're doing an object, you will probably want to have some like powder spray on hand, depending on what object you're shooting. So usually that's if an object is reflective or is like transparent, like glass in some way, you most likely want to coat that object in like a powder or something that gives it a texture in some way that doesn't make it see-through in any way or reflective. And the reason for that is because photogrammetry is trying to actually compute the light, and if the light's going through the object, it can't actually build that 3D object properly because it's going to look different from every angle. And you really don't need to worry about like like, oh no, this blue thing that's highly reflective is now covered in like powder and it doesn't look like the color that it's supposed to be. You can always like the end goal is you're trying to get the shape of the object, not necessarily the actual object, and you can always go back and in the 3D program manipulate your texture so that then it is the color of the original object. So you could replace. So if you sprayed like a mirrored object, you could then after you've converted it to a 3D object, then put a reflective material or image or whatever it is that you have to then like texture that object so that it then is reflective in 3D. And then the last thing in this that you're going to need is patience. So once you get all your photos set up, you're going to have them on your computer. You're going to use like Meshroom or some other program that I mentioned, and you're just going to have to let it process. And that process can take a while, depending on how many photos you pumped in, depending on how complex it is. Usually, I'd give it a couple hours. My favorite thing to do is to do everything the night before, and then when I'm about to go to bed, I just let the program run, and then when I wake up the next day, then I have my nice 3D model. So just be prepared for that. Okay, so now that you understand like the things that you need to be able to do 3D scanning in some way, you can then, I'm actually going to get into the process of what you need to be doing in order to get your 3D model. So, so you want to, if you're doing, you're shooting indoors, which is going to be likely in the current state of things, um, you'll want to set up a safe area that has not a lot of people running around. So if it's in the middle of the living room, maybe make sure if you have kids that they're like off in bed, they're not going to like knock over anything because you just need everything to be consistent and safe. You're going to want to set up your lights so that they're even. You're going to want to really plan the best location for your object and your camera. Do you have a turntable? If you have that, then you can just have a really stationary space. If is it do you not have a turntable, you can then need to make a space where you can put the camera around your object as much as you need to. And then just and then if your object is reflective or translucent, then to make sure that you have something to coat it. If you're doing an outdoors area, so if you're like taking photographs, all your photographs outside to then like build a whole space, you usually want to figure out how much time it's going to take to do all your shots, do a rough estimation. A good way to do this is to actually like go to the location, walk around, and do like a pretend shooting around the space and just see how long you feel like that's going to take. You also want to plan like your route because you're kind of trying to loop around objects because the idea is to keep going around the objects that are important to your scene. Um, so you might have a very specific route that you need to go to plan out to get the best shots and the most shots of what you need to do. You also want to plan on the time of day. If it's like overcast, I've heard that's the best. So if you have like very, again, even lighting, it's going to be great. You might run into trouble if you do it in a really bright time and then the sun moves over a long period of time and your shadows and your objects are going to be like moving along with it. So when you have your 3D model, it might look a little bit weird. So something to be aware of. And then lastly, in terms of that, if you're doing outdoors, you want to be conscious of the traffic in the area. So if there's a lot of people, um, you want to make sure they're not really going in where you need to be, or if they're not in the shots, because it actually might mess up some of your shots. You can get some weird artifacts and stuff in your photos and your 3D scans if you have a lot of traffic. So then when you're actually photographing your object, the idea is that you want to always be doing it in a circular pattern and you want to stay at the same distance every time. You want, like I said earlier, you want to take approximately, depending on how complex your object is, about 50 photos. Usually you want to plan going around an object from one angle um, at the consistent distance and getting a large number of photos and then go up more and tilt your camera down at another angle and then go around again, take your photos and then higher up. And then you also want to go under at a lower angle so you get the bottom parts of your objects as well. Just the key is you always want to, while you're doing that, each photo that's next to each other to have roughly about 50 to 70% overlap from the last photo. And the reason for that is that the photogrammetry software actually then it uses similarities in the pixels in the photo to then connect them all to then create your 3D object. So the more overlap you have, the easier time your computer's going to have processing that information and converting it into 3D. So always go for 50 to about 70% of overlap for your photos. It's really important. And again, remember, you want to shoot from multiple angles and all at an even distance. And then converting the whole process using the software. So you want to set aside a bunch of time to be able to do this. You'll get all your photos that you shot, throw them on your computer, and then you'll get those photographs and then put them into the software. So like Meshroom, you can just drag and drop all those photos straight into it, and then hit this little go button, and it'll start processing the whole thing for you. Again, it's going to take quite a bit of time to convert it, mostly depending on how complex your scene is. Sometimes too, you can also get errors in your when you convert it. Like it might say that a large chunk of photos won't work with it. At least with Mushroom, what you can do is you can then go back and actually reshoot your object or scene, and then bring those photos that were missing before and put them back into your render, and it'll start it out. It'll use some of that data and start from a halfway point, and then convert your object, and you can fix up kind of like little areas that you might have missed accidentally. So that's one good reason too to have a controlled area, because then you can just go back and get the shots you need if you messed up on it before. So that's pretty useful. Then you're gonna probably have to do some cleanup. That's why I had that mesh mixer in there. You can use ZBrush, which is a lot more complex in terms of cleanup. A lot of times you can get like from people's hair, you get artifacts just because the camera has a hard time picking up on it, and you get these little specks. A lot of times you're gonna need to clean out that space. You might get these weird planes cutting through people's heads or like different other objects. So Mesh Mixer is a really easy way to clean it up. You're going to get holes, kind of like in the photo here. Some programs have it where you can just literally hit a button and it'll seal off all the holes. But you're going to usually, after every scan, want to manually check your 3D model to make sure that it's cleaned up, especially if you're going to be 3D printing, because if it has a hole in it, it might actually change how the 3D print comes out. And then also you might need to take your images that are created for your textures in your object, like what we talked about before. We have the flat image that wraps around everything. You can take those into Photoshop and actually like paint and clean up certain parts of it manually if you want to. And then once you do that, after you practice a couple times, done it on a number of random objects or whatever it is, primarily I'm guessing your artwork, you're done. You have your 3D model. It's a long process, but once you kind of figure it out, then you get a nice 3D model that you can do all the things I mentioned with. You can get more complex. If you want to get into it further, you can start having multiple cameras set up at the same time to take shots a lot quicker. You can set up a studio for 3D scanning. The benefit of setting up a studio with multiple cameras is you can get stuff like animals, kind of like here you can see where something that maybe is moving a lot, you can take a shot of pretty quickly. But once the 3D model is made, you can just put it on whatever you want. A really good website to use to upload these, I would say, would be like sketchfab.com. Sketchfab.com. They have a free service where you can just upload any 3D model, and you can actually embed them into your website. So if you wanted to, you could get a 3D object and put it into your personal artist portfolio website. So yeah, that's primarily it. That's mostly the entire topic. That's kind of a brief introduction to it. This stream is going to be archived, so if you are missing any information, you'll be able to go back and look at the links that I put up and check these tools out. Again, as an artist, I would recommend to start with phone applications just to see how it works roughly, and then from there, you can start using the computer programs, which I would recommend using Mushroom, which is the easiest to work with. And then I think you can start playing from there your 3D models and kind of just see how it works. And I do hope to see more artists use 3D scanning, primarily photogrammetry, especially since it's free. And also, I like seeing 3D models. But I think that's it. If you want to leave some feedback or some notes on future topics that you'd like for me to cover, just go to this link that I have here, interactiveinitiative.org/survey. It's a little Google form you can fill out, and you can put in a note of topics you'd like for me to cover. Next week's topic is undecided yet, but I'll post it as soon as I decide it. But thank you for popping by. Have an awesome week, and I'll see you next time. Mm-hmm.